Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Poured today by Dr. Pepper. Fun day with Georgia spring practice yesterday. Running backs kind of in the spotlight. That's always a fun topic for us. We're big fans of Nate Frazier. We believe in a lot of other Georgia running backs, including Chauncey Bowens, who we also heard from yesterday. So the discussion was around this group that took a pretty big step forward in 2025, how it can take an even bigger step in 2026. Kirby Smart had opinions on that. Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, they both had opinions on that, all in the efforts for the Georgia offense overall to be more explosive. A lot today on how that gets done, including how they are leaning on Georgia's history as a way of doing that. You're going to like that. Kirby Smart corrected the record, if you want to say this, when it comes to the viral video we had fun with the other day. We'll have more fun with that. Davin Bellamy also joins us before we're done. That's always cool. Mike Griffith here today as well. Jam-packed on a Wednesday. Glad that you are here too. Most importantly, more than anything, your presence here matters to us today. So we're going to try to make good use of your time, moving fast. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Poured today by Dr. Pepper. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. College football and Dr. Pepper. It's a pepper thing.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If you'll allow me a brief detour before the show starts today, I do feel like, now I'm sure many of you could cite plenty of holes on my resume, but when I think about my professional accomplishments here at DawgNation, one of the holes I feel like I have on my resume is we've never really done a good April Fool's joke. Now, April Fool's is kind of corny, but let's be honest, I'm also kind of corny. So I'm the kind of person that would love to do a nice April Fool's gag, something along those lines. But if I ever did one, I'd want it to be a big one, right? You want it to really work. And we don't have that planned for you here today, so just go ahead and know that. But on the event of today being April 1st, which is kind of cool, we like the spring, I do regret the fact that in now, going on 11 years of doing this show, we've never quite, at least I don't think, executed the April Fool's joke gag. I hope to work long enough to one day maybe make this a good thing and maybe have some fun with it. Obviously, well past the shelf life of that kind of thing being all that funny. But eventually we'll try to pull one off. Today, though, is not that day. But either way, we're glad to have you with us today. Instead, we're going to have some fun talking about some, I think, pretty serious football stuff. Yesterday, I thought was really great for what has been, I think, a pretty fan-friendly Georgia spring practice thus far. We never really know what's going on. All we hear is rumors. By the time I hear them, it's second, third-hand information. But we still try to consume what we can and present what's available to us. And the vibe that we're getting from Georgia spring practice thus far is pretty positive. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. Perhaps you have some concerns, and I would certainly join you in many of those concerns. But overall, it feels like if you're a Georgia fan seeking optimism about your team for the upcoming season, you've got plenty of reason to feel that way. And one of the position groups for which that is true is probably running back. You know the big story last year. All kinds of talk during spring practice. We want to run the ball better, along with stopping the run. We want to run the ball better. We want to stop the run better. Those were stated explicitly and repeatedly as two big missions for Georgia. And for the most part in 2025, it was mission accomplished. This year, the tone has been slightly different. Now the big stated goal is we want to be more explosive offensively. And by the way, when we talk about being more explosive offensively, we're not comparing 2026 Georgia to 2019 LSU here. We're comparing 2026 Georgia to the other offenses around college football. And across the board, scoring is down, plays per drive are up, explosive play rate around college football was lower than it's been. Georgia was probably even lower than it should be. So when we're talking about being more explosive offensively, we're not talking about necessarily setting a record for the most explosive offense of all time. We're talking about being more explosive in comparison to other teams that are in the same category of Georgia competing for a championship. In other words, as Georgia seeks to be more explosive, it is doing so in a sport that's a little bit more about clock draining, sustaining drives, a lot of plays, not quite the 50-point per game offense stuff we saw at the beginning of the decade. You don't have quite as much of that. maybe going, or the end of the last decade, you don't have as much of that going on anymore. So we live in a time in which running backs are going to be really important, even for an offense that seeks to be more explosive. So for a group that took a big step forward last year, guys like Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, maybe most prominently mentioned all of that, what do they do to take the next step here this year? What does Kirby Smart want to see from his running backs moving into 2026? And I thought, in speaking about this yesterday, Kirby Smart did a really good job of laying out in pretty specific terms how you go from being what was probably a good group a year ago to maybe an elite group here in 2026. Good stuff from Kirby Smart. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, leadership, experience, third down. They don't have a lot of experience, so catching the ball out of the backfield, being better receivers, blitz pickup schemes, yards after contact, and breaking tackles. That's essentially what a back's measured by is what do you get that the offensive line doesn't get for you, and that's how you become elite.
So to get deep in the weeds on this for a second, if you like the math analytics type blog stuff, when they're measuring offensive lines, historically the way that the analytics folks have looked at this is, and you might squabble with this, whatever, but this is just what has been prevailing wisdom, that on a running play, the first 5 yards of a running play, theoretically in the eyes of a lot of the math nerd types, is all to the credit of the offensive line. If it's 1st and 10, you run for 4 yards. Those 4 yards, the credit for that belongs to the offensive line. And anything beyond 5 yards, let's say between 5 and 10 yards, that's essentially thought to be shared credit. Running back gets half that credit. Offensive line gets half the credit for a 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even a 10-yard run. And then beyond that, now you have burst through the hole. You've gotten past the second level. Now we're talking about credit that goes to the running back almost solely for yards 11, 12, 13, all the way through. That's the general thought there. And that is basically, in so many words, what Kirby Smart's also saying too, that offensive line opens the hole. Any college-level running back can run through the hole if the hole is big enough. But what do you do when you get to the hole or when you get through the hole? Can you make a linebacker miss? Can you lower your shoulder and run over a guy? Can you be elusive and turn a 7-yard gain into a 9-yard gain, or turn a 7-yard gain into a 14-yard gain? And now we're getting into the category of what can make Georgia's offense more explosive and the running backs in the process more elite when it comes to that. The other thing that Kirby, I think, mentions there is, and this is one of those moments where we're going to learn a lot more about it, especially a guy like Nate Frazier in particular, is that almost exclusively last season, 2024, in third down situations, Georgia had Cash Jones in the game. Cash Jones was a very good pass-catching running back, showed an ability to get past the defense. Really, in 2024, when Georgia was having all kinds of wide receiver issues and drops and things like that, sometimes Cash almost felt like your most reliable target. This was a guy that had a real role at Georgia. He was the pass-catching option. Well, now he's gone. And presumably a guy like Nate Frazier, who you think is back at Georgia on big compensation, a lot of expectations, one of the average Georgia fan's favorite player, that some of the third down stuff that maybe Cash Jones would have gotten, some of that goes to a guy like Nate Frazier this year. And as Kirby Smart just said in the clip, that's not really a role that Nate's got a lot of experience with. So as he seeks to be more explosive, as, to use Kirby Smart's word, these Georgia running backs seek to be more elite, turning normal plays into special plays, what from Nate Frazier's perspective needs to happen for that to get done? Nate, I think, is always an incredibly introspective guy on the topic that Kirby Smart just addressed. Be more explosive, be more of a factor on third down, catch the ball, make more things happen than just whatever, the offensive lineman does to open the hole, making guys miss, shaking off tacklers. Here's how Nate Frazier said, in his own words, his mission of doing just that, Nate, from yesterday.
What I've been trying to focus on is really the small things, because the small things can turn into big things. So I try to be intentional with everything, based off third down, trying to ID fronts faster, try to ID what blitz are they bringing, if they're running being cat, they're about to bring size to safety. So basically that's what it really been. When you come here to Georgia and you sign those papers, the coaches know that we bring in backs that just can't just run the ball, or they can't just pass, or they can't just catch out the backfield. We try to bring in backs that can do all of the above. So, as a group, with Cash leading. We just try to really watch his film and see the things he done and see, okay, how did he beat these defenders in these one-on-one situations? Or how did he make these plays like a Florida play? I don't know how he scored. Well, I think when he scored in the Sugar Bowl in 2024, he caught the ball and stumbled and scored, So we just try to ask questions and see how we can become better third down backs, because being a third down back is a big thing and it helps you out in the future.
Let me tell you what I think has been cool about Georgia spring practice, those we've heard from during, and this is a small thing, but I do think you should notice this, is that in this mission to be more explosive offensively, Georgia, whether it be Kirby or some of the players when they're speaking, they are, I think, giving you specific ideas for how that can be accomplished. In other words, they're not just trying harder. They're not just putting their mind to it. He's saying, hey, I've got to recognize defenses so I have the vision to know where they're going to be so I can be running in a different direction, or taking a 4-yard gain and turning it into a 14-yard gain, catching the ball out of the backfield. That's an easy way to get explosives. That's something that Cash Jones did. That's pretty specific information being provided there by Nate Frazier. I think that's interesting. The notion that, as he said, small things can become big things. I think that's a really interesting line for George in its effort to be more explosive, take the normal gain, add a few more yards to it, and suddenly, as an offense, you are just more explosive across the board. Here's the other thing that Frazier says in that quote, though, that you can't help but notice. He says, listen, when you come to Georgia, when you, to use his phrase, sign those papers, here's what you're going to be expected to do. In other words, Frazier openly acknowledges there that there is a business-like aspect to how Frazier got to Georgia the first time, and certainly how Frazier stayed at Georgia over the course of this offseason. You'll remember months ago we talked plenty about this. The fear that he might leave, the hard work by Georgia to prevent that from happening, to really show him that Georgia was the best place for him. And we've heard from Nate on this in the past, but he also talked about this again yesterday, acknowledging that, there was some chatter here. There was some stuff going on, but ultimately he knew that wearing that Georgia uniform again in 2026 was something that he needed to do. Here is Nate being pretty candid about all of that yesterday.
It was crazy. I just woke up one day and I just seen all those things, and I really just turned off my phone and said, that's what social media is. It's just rumors. So I just turned off the phone and just got back to work. And, other opportunities, I know this is where I'm supposed to be. I love this place. I already know I don't belong nowhere else. I feel like at this point I've showed everybody I bleed red and black. So, yeah.
As candid as Nate was, saying that, of course, he noticed that. Of course, he recognized that. In some cases, it was real. It was true. It seems like there was a negotiation ongoing. Kirby Smart himself was also pretty candid about this, too, that in the world we live in now, these are re-signings, and you got to work to do it. And you're seeing the opposite of that with Georgia basketball right now. Players a lot of Georgia fans enjoyed cheering for, they're now off to their next destination. Luckily for Georgia football, they didn't have to worry about that too much this year. Very good with player retention, keeping Frazier one of the biggest examples of that. And Kirby yesterday was just as candid on that topic as, in many respects, Nate Frazier has been. This is what Kirby said yesterday.
Yeah, almost every player resigned, so that's not like a big deal. That's a big deal to you guys and all that. Like to get a player to stay, they typically do resign. So I'm very pleased with where Nate is. I'm happy with his progress. I'm happy with that room's progress. We got to break some more tackles in there, and we got to find some guys that can play on third down.
So the fact that Kirby's even willing to use the word re-sign in this age now just gives you an idea of how the sport has changed and what the reality is. And Kirby may downplay the feeling of bringing a guy like Frazier back, but the truth is we know a large share of Georgia's budget, a large share of Georgia's time, both time and treasure devoted to retaining as many key players as possible, and Georgia, I think, does deserve some credit for being able to do it. But as Kirby also says there, it's not just Nate Frazier in this running back room this year. His presence is the single most important aspect for that group this season, but he's not the only one who has done some big things in a Georgia uniform and will be expected to do big things here this year, too. You got a guy like Chauncey Bowens who flashed at times a year ago. And what's interesting is while Frazier brings one set of skills to the table, one collection of characteristics. In some respects, Chauncey Bowens is a similar back. In other ways, pretty different. Well, we also heard from Chauncey Bowens yesterday. And I think that Chauncey Bowens did a good job of describing how Frazier and Bowens work together, what makes them different as backs, and why, for those of us who love UGA, why having both as a part of this Georgia running back room in 2026 could be a very good thing. Here's Chauncey.
I just think he's just extremely explosive, real twitchy, can definitely hurt you in a bunch of different ways and get outside of you. And once he does that, I mean, he's gone. You're not catching him. I feel like I'm similar in ways, but obviously, I weigh a little bit more. So just bringing just a different aspect and bringing physicality as well, and kind of just like a thunder and lightning type of tandem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. That's obviously the cliche we use with running backs all the time. In this particular case, though, while it may seem somewhat true, the truth is we saw Frazier get even better with hard yards between the tackles last year. And frankly, Chauncey Bowens at times has also shown an ability to run away from people as well. It's almost like Chauncey's shortchanging himself by saying he's just the Thunder in the Thunder and Lightning category, because at times last year, Bowens seemed to bring plenty of lightning himself, and obviously Nate Frazier's got some toughness in between the tackles too. So there may be a little bit of a Thunder and Lightning contrast here, but the truth is both guys, I think, do demonstrate some aspects of both speed and power with how they approach all of this. Now, let me make one more small point about the running back situation, and then we'll move on. You do a show like this, you talk as much as I do, you are, of course, going to get plenty wrong. So every now and then when we get something right, there's always going to be the perhaps immodest temptation to pat yourself in the back. A prediction that we definitely got right the other day that's already proving to be true. We said for a guy like Nate Frazier, he was going to probably just love having the great former running back Robert Edwards as a part of the Georgia coaching staff. And our reason for saying that is because in the interviews we've done with Nate in the past, he has just gushed over his respect for the history of Georgia running backs and more modern times like Sonny Michel and Todd Gurley. But all throughout time, the respect that Nate has had for RBU is such a big part of his personality, and he's been more than happy to put that on display for us. So to have a truly great former running back like Robert Edwards now working back at Georgia in concert with Josh Crawford, Edwards as the assistant running backs coach, we think that's valuable for Georgia overall, but specifically we thought it'd be a big deal for Nate Frazier. It seems like that's already proving to be true. Let me start with this. Kirby Smart yesterday on the topic of running backs, hot topic with Georgia spring practice yesterday, talked about the role that he thinks that Edwards fills after a pretty distinguished tenure as a high school coach in Georgia, now back working in his alma mater. Kirby on Robert Edwards.
Robert's a guy that I have a tremendous respect for. I think he embodies what resiliency is. He is a tremendous person. He persevered so much in his career, and not only his career here, but his career post-college. And these young men sometimes, they want to emulate the guys that played here before them, the guys that played in the National Football League, and they don't realize that your career can be, one injury away. And Robert's living proof of that, and he overcame his and came back and had a successful career. And he wants to pour into these young men just like we do as coaches. And who better to do that than somebody that has a track record of overcoming things. And he's here for the players to assist them, and I think that's a big draw.
We did a whole big show on this the other day, and by the way, nice photos coming in here from a Georgia practice. You see Robert Edwards there doing some work, kind of off to the right with the hat on, doing some work with the running backs. That's a better look at him right there. If you're watching on video, you're seeing some really great collection of photos. Our Cody Chaffins, Kaylee Manziel, Jeff Sintel were able to put together from their time at practice a couple of weeks ago. But the point is, we did a whole show about this, about Robert Edwards both having been through a lot to become a first-round pick, to have a really debilitating injury, and in many respects have your NFL career cut short, although he did come back from that and win NFL Comeback Player of the Year. It's an amazing football story, and Edwards tells his own story well. And what we said was, well, Nate Frazier's going to eat this up, and it has the potential to have a huge impact on Nate Frazier. Well, sometimes we do just get it right, because Frazier yesterday talked about this, that yes, he loves the history of Georgia football. You've got some of that history at practice with you every day, a guy that can help get Nate to where he wants to go. Just sometimes it just works out the way it's supposed to. And in Nate Frazier's own telling, that may be what the arrival of Robert Edwards means for him. Here's Nate.
When I first committed here, I feel like you guys know this by now, I was big on the tradition here at the running back position. So coming towards this university, I most definitely watched a lot of his highlights, watched a lot of the things that he did here at the university. He was a great running back like a lot of the others. But one of the main things I really noticed and, like, paid attention as I watched the film, and I asked him, like, how did you get over your fumbling issue? Because I know that's one of the issues that he had. And I asked him, I said, what was the main thing that helped you get over it and be able to play the next down and the next play? And the things he told me, he said, why are you still thinking about it? Fumbling is a mindset thing. Whatever you do in life is a mindset thing. You can cancel out all the things that you don't want done as long as you have a great mindset. So, having him in our room, him playing the position, especially him coming to the school, is big for us. It means a lot because you know that the things that he's telling you is not just for no reason, because he's been through the things. He played the position. He was great at the position as well. So it's great getting the knowledge from him and being a sponge and soaking all the things in that he's telling us.
Isn't that great? I just think it's wonderful. I think that's cool that Nate would relay what Coach Edwards is already telling him and the respect that he has for the Georgia running back history. I just think that's awesome. Now, let me finish something just for fun. I think this is really cool. So because of clips like that and the others we've played from Frazier over the years, the interviews we've been lucky enough to conduct with him, we kind of think of Nate Frazier as the historian among the Georgia running backs. He's the guy that loves RBU. He's the guy that's paid homage to guys from the past with the jazz hands and the bow and all the celebrations that other Georgia running backs have done. He's the guy that seems to really soak all that up. We found out yesterday that he's not the only current Georgia running back who also has a pretty cool appreciation of history. I didn't know this. Maybe I should have. But Chauncey Bowens has also got some of that too, much the same way Frazier loves the great backs of the past. Well, this year, Chauncey Bowens is going to wear number 5. Obviously, that's a number that's meant something for Georgia running backs in the past. And yesterday, Chauncey Bowens talked about why he's switching from, 33 last year to number 5 this year. And much like Nate Frazier, it's also because of some respect for Georgia's football history. I thought this was really fun. Take a listen to this.
It was kind of just a number that I was eyeing for a while, and I actually lived with Garrison Hurst's son, Gannon, so I lived with him for a couple years. So, we had a really good relationship. And I asked him, I was like, what do you think, if I switch to 5, if I wore your dad's number? He was like, nah, it would be cool. So it's something I was eyeing for a while. And then Noah wore it last year, and I was like, you know what? I'm like, yeah, let me make that switch.
I love that. And by the way, it's cool because, Garrison Hurst's nephew, Andrew Beard, running back at Prince Avenue Christian, big running back here for the class of 2027. So kind of interesting just to think about that. But also, I joked about this with my good friend Randy McMichael on 92.9 The Game yesterday. I do a weekly spot with them. Garrison Hurst should have won the 1992 Heisman. So the fact that guys like Chauncey Bowens still have respect for that, obviously a relationship with Garrison's son, all of that just seems really good for me. And all of this feels like great vibes for the Georgia running back room right now. Kirby Smart says, here's how this group becomes elite. You got to make guys miss. You got to catch the ball to the backfield. You got to be a factor on third down. You got to shake off would-be tacklers. Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, as the veterans in the room, helping lead the way for that. Their mindset seems to be in the right place. A guy like Robert Edwards stepping in to help Josh Crawford get the most out of this group. Big step forward for them in 2025, maybe an even bigger step towards true elite status in 2026. Very important topic as Georgia gets ready for the upcoming season. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, poured today by Dr. Pepper. Great to have you with us, whether it's live on video, on demand after that. And by the way, DawgNation YouTube page, there's so much that came out of Georgia yesterday. We clearly don't have time to do it all in one show. In fact, just on this one topic alone, we're already running late. So if you want to get all of it at your own pace, your own time, Kirby Smart, Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier, everybody who spoke yesterday, you can get that at our DawgNation YouTube page and all the other great stuff from a wonderful spring here thus far. We're trying to cover it for you in every direction we can. We appreciate your patronage of us as we do, and we appreciate your support of Dr. Pepper as well. How about the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper? It's one of those things that I love each and every day. Just a little pick-me-up, a little nice enjoyment. It's important to have these little things in your life you look forward to, small, simple pleasures. And for me, especially when it's nice outside, sometimes go sit on the back porch and just pop the can and enjoy a little Dr. Pepper. It's just a sort of simple, I think of it as kind of a wholesome thing, just a great way to enjoy a great day. Dr. Pepper makes it good. So as you're out there shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you pick up your groceries, whatever you got going on with that, I want you to pick up the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. All kinds of options. If you like the regular stuff like I do, Diet Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar, the more traditional flavors. But they also have these special offerings right now as well. The Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream, the Blackberry Zero Sugar. Word on the street is Creamy Coconut is coming back. A lot of y'all really liked that a couple of years ago, and it sounds like it's on its way back. So word of mouth continues to serve that well. We're just really proud to have Dr. Pepper as a part of DawgNation Daily because Dr. Pepper's a big supporter of college football. And when Dr. Pepper thinks about college football, they think about DawgNation Daily. So all seems to work out pretty well. DawgNation Daily, college football Dr. Pepper truly is a pepper thing. Glad to have them as a part of the show here today. All right, jam-packed and fast-paced. Davin Bellamy later on, Mike Griffith in a moment. For now, though, let's get ready to go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. And I want to revisit just for a moment a conversation starter from the beginning of the week. Somebody apparently right place, right time. Kirby Smart yelling on the practice microphone. Apparently there was a big collision during practice. Elyiss Williams, the soon-to-be second-year Georgia tight end. Amaris Williams, recent Georgia transfer from Auburn. And to hear it told from the practice field, totally out of context, sounds like Elyiss Williams on this particular practice rep got the best of Amaris Williams. If you missed it earlier this week, here's a quick reminder one more time.
Elyiss destroyed Amaris. Elyiss just destroyed Amaris. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Please don't put him in against the run. Please don't put him in against the run. Oh my God. Oh my God. Cue.
So that was the viral clip that generated a lot of conversation. And for those of us who love following spring practice, listen, this is kind of what it is. It's rumors. It's sometimes half-true information. It's fragments of data, and you just try to piece together and make sense of it. And most people understand that, right? Most people understand that we're always looking at an incomplete picture of partial information and trying to make of it what we can. That's why we don't take ourselves too seriously. We don't take really, hopefully, anything too seriously. All of this is just in good fun. And, of course, we didn't make too big of a deal about this because we still think Amaris Williams is going to be a terrific player for Georgia, whatever may have happened in this particular practice rep. Kirby Smart, though, yesterday was asked about it. And, frankly, I'm glad that he was because it gives him a chance to talk on what is, I think, an interesting topic for a lot of us. Kirby Smart, as you would maybe expect, downplaying some of the viral nature of this particular moment. And I guess, in a way, fact-checking himself, correcting misinformation that maybe he initially provided. Judge for yourself. Kirby Smart's own explanation for the viral clip that now everyone's at least heard.
Yeah, I don't really worry about it much. I saw it. A bunch of people sent it to me, but, I mean, it's not something we put out. It's something somebody else, captures and put out. So I don't worry about it. We don't practice indoors. I don't worry about what other people think about our practices and what they do. I mean, I'll say this, that play in particular, he actually slipped and stepped on somebody's foot. So it's probably not a fair assessment of him because when you step on somebody else's foot and slip, sometimes you get your ass whipped and then sometimes you just slip and you're not allowed to slip. But it wasn't as bad as it seemed, certainly. But I don't worry about it because, there's a certain level of toughness it requires to play football, and that's all for you guys to worry about. Y'all like to capture things and put them out and make them a big deal. We do this every day.
I do think that there is some truth to what Kirby Smart's saying in the standpoint of when all you hear is the audio clip, Kirby yelling like this. I think for some people, now the truth is I haven't met any Georgia fan that's scandalized by it. I haven't actually seen a media person be scandalized by it. It's just interesting. Sometimes things are just interesting, and Kirby yelling at practice is just interesting. And I really haven't seen anybody take it too far or make it something that's not or anything like that. But the essence of what Smart says is still true, which is this is a practice where everybody's moving 100 miles an hour and gigantic bodies are colliding with each other. And in that context, yelling is just a normal thing to have go on. Everybody's got energy. Everybody's got a lot of, there's just a lot happening at a Georgia practice. One of those things I wish every Georgia fan could see, and I guess now if you give them enough money, you can see. But I wish everybody could see this because it's actually pretty inspiring and it's pretty contagious. They move really fast. There's, a constant challenging of everyone to give a little bit more. And it's a cool thing to see. And when you have a viral clip like this, there is an element of it being contraband. It feels like you're getting something you're not supposed to get. And so that makes it slightly more interesting, even if it's only a couple of seconds long. But what Smart says overall is probably pretty true, is that, okay, you hear me yelling at Amaris for losing this practice rep, but keep in mind that over the course of a long practice, there are 1,000,000 reps, and Amaris may have won, 100 in a row after this particular one, that all of this is just sort of in one ear, out the other. The honest truth is, every Georgia fan I've ever heard from seems to understand that. I don't think I've ever met a media person that doesn't understand that. It's just even though this happens semi-frequently, it's still somewhat rare to be able to have this coming out of a Georgia practice. So, of course, people are going to be entertained by it and have some fun with it. And as we said earlier this week, it's almost one of those perfect things as well that seems to further the traditional Georgia narrative. Here's a guy like Amaris Williams, arriving with a lot of fanfare, has a chance to be a very good player. We would predict probably will be a good player. But there always seems to be that welcome to Georgia moment. And it could be rare occurrence of the welcome to Georgia moment actually being captured, at least on audio. Maybe Georgia fans getting a glimpse of that earlier this week. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. We love Georgia Farm Bureau because we love Georgia's farmers. Listen, one of the most important jobs, actually not one of, the most important job for any society is to feed its citizens. You can't have a society, can't have a civilization if people can't eat. And in Georgia, going back how many hundreds of years, that is something that our state has just done. I'll put the Georgia farmland, fertile soil up against anything, anywhere. We just have it here. We've been blessed with that. And it takes hard work to till that land, take care of it, and harvest those crops, and take care of the cattle and all the other things that go on related to that kind of thing. And the respect that our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau have for folks who are doing that kind of work is, of course, legendary. They've served them for a long time when it comes to their insurance needs. And that same level of service can now be yours too, whether you know the first thing about farming or not. They want to treat you the same way they've treated Georgia's farmers for a very long time. That means giving you friendly service when it comes to your auto insurance. You got to have it. I drive long commute every day. I go past 1 million fender benders literally almost every single day. People are exchanging insurance information, trying to figure out what's next. Well, that phone call to Georgia Farm Bureau in a situation like that helps you navigate that a little bit more smoothly. Home insurance, life insurance, all that kind of thing. Georgia Farm Bureau is all about it all. They are always the home team. We mean it. They are Georgians just like you, taking care of Georgians just like you, friendly, happy every single day. That's why you want to check them out. 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. One more time on that web address, gfbinsurance.com. Find out for yourself when it comes to your insurance needs why Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right, so later on, we've gotten some really good insight from Davin Bellamy last couple of weeks about what it feels like to be on the other side of some of this kind of stuff at Georgia practice, being the guy yelled at, being the guy challenged. Davin will give us more on that here in a little bit, plus some other interesting insight as these dogs go through spring practice. But for now, on everything happening around the Georgia Bulldogs, how about a Wednesday conversation with Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily, poured by Dr. Pepper.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Mike Griffith. Always glad to have him here. Mike, Kirby Smart kind of pushing back on people who enjoy these viral videos and things like that. But listen, actual true information from Georgia practice is pretty scarce. It's all, for the most part, second, third hand rumor mill stuff, and I'm here for that as well. You know, when you do get any fragment of that, fans are, of course, going to be entertained by it, curious about it. I really haven't heard any fan make more of it than it needed to be made, but there's just a natural interest in something that feels like contraband, feels like you're not supposed to get it. There's just going to be a natural curiosity around all of that. I don't fault fans for being interested in that sort of thing, do you?
No, not at all. I mean, if somebody would have been posted up outside of practice 4 years ago, they would have heard Kirby yelling at Brock Bowers about how a freshman was covering him and Malachi Starks. So, you know, we've heard the microphone stories, and we've heard that the microphone doesn't miss anybody. And to your point, it might have been a moment to try to embarrass or fire up the new guy from Auburn. Certainly he comes in as a guy that Georgia needs to contribute, talking about Amaris, and he wanted to make a statement. He wanted to make sure this guy was going to go hard and let him know, hey, I expect you to try to win every rep. Now, I don't know as far as the explanation and, it's almost like he was, giving the kid an out for losing the rep. But at the end of the day, Kirby wanted to make a statement, and he did. And yes, it got out there, and I would probably dare say the kid's probably having pretty good practices moving forward, Brandon. So, we've heard Tyke. Remember when Tyke Smith got called out at that practice we were at for not hustling? Remember the way Darnell Washington used to get called out? So Kirby Smart does use the microphone, does use peer pressure to motivate people. It's just to your point. Now there's people paying attention and listening and looking for, interesting insight, because Kirby's not going to tell you after practice at a press conference, boy, Amaris Williams really got blown up on one play. He's not going to share that. And, there's not insight to that because practices aren't open. But as someone who used to go to open practices for about 10 years at Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee, I can tell you that, there's plays like that, the 20 or 30 or 40 a scrimmage. And I still remember Philip Fulmer getting upset with me because I was writing about Jamal Lewis breaking off some runs. He said, "You're making him, sound like the next Herschel Walker. He just had a couple of good plays." And I said, "Well, people want to know about those plays, Coach." And he said, "Yeah, but everything's not the greatest or the worst." And, moments like this, though, clips like this kind of remind me of that, how we kind of cherry pick moments to put guys on the spot or provide a little bit color. And in this case, Kirby did. And, the microphone goes loud around the neighborhood.
Well, along those lines, I do almost wish that every fan could see a version of this because, look, there is so much that happened. There's so many reps during a Georgia practice. Even, the media viewing period, even like a 10, 15, the other day it was 20 minutes. Even in a situation like that, there are a million things happening, right? And there's a very good chance that Amaris losing a practice rep to Elyiss Williams is like the 14th most interesting thing to happen at Georgia practice that day.
That's right.
And if a recording were to go on further, 9 seconds after he's yelling at Amaris Williams, now he's yelling at a completely different player from a completely different position, completely different reason about something totally unrelated, and all of a sudden, whatever happened, in the very, very recent past, completely forgotten. It's just an interesting thing to see. Even media types only see a few minutes of it. There's such an energy there. I do believe, some of this stuff ends up feeling like myth-making sometimes, but I do believe that there is an energy that exists with the Georgia practices that is not easy for other programs to replicate. They couldn't copy it even if they wanted to. You have to be so committed to doing it that way. And as we've said over and over again, it's not for everybody. And listen, even when you practice that way, it doesn't always guarantee success on Saturdays. There is no perfect way to do anything. But Georgia has chosen to do it the hard way, the intense way through practice. And I do think that's mostly what fans take from these little things that occasionally come out as, is that, boy, at Georgia, you're going to be held to a very, very high standard. And just even surviving a practice sometimes is its own version of a success story.
Yeah, and there's elite coaches, and not everybody can pull it off, Brandon. Not every coach can be that on top of their players. Tom Izzo at Michigan State, though, was a guy I remember going to. He still has open play. He has open locker room. He has open everything. That's Izzo's way. Kind of like Kirby with the microphone. Only Izzo invites the media in, and he stops practices and gets right in the middle of drill and calls guys out and calls them all sorts of funny, crazy names. And this is Kirby's way. But the thing is, and you just said it, it takes a certain kind of player that wants to be pushed hard. And, just, you might imagine, I know you've done some coaching and, you motivate youth. And, I think about the difference between youth and young men. And I think about the way I was motivated by drill sergeants, right? They kind of put the fear of God in you, and they kind of, get on you, and they push you, and they make you so mad that you find yourself so motivated to do things that maybe you didn't think you could do. And maybe the idea for Amaris Williams that he's going to go out and give 100% for, an hour and a half and try to win every rep against another 5-star, maybe there's a part of him that's like, man, every now and then, you got to take a play off or rest. Or it's like, no, that's not happening here. That is not the way Georgia goes. And that, to your point, is what these NFL scouts see is, man, these guys go hard. They, it's physical, it's demanding. And that's why Georgia players go higher in the NFL draft, Brandon, because when you draft a Georgia Bulldog, you've got a guy that's gone through it all under Kirby Smart. A guy that understands where the bar is and pushes himself to measure up, because guys don't come out of Georgia and, go lazy in the NFL. It just doesn't happen. These guys are motivated. They understand what it takes at practice. And Kirby Smart sets the bar. And clearly, he's not laying off. And he loves this, by the way. He likes that he can coach guys hard. Remember last year, he was worried that these guys didn't know how to be coached hard. Kirby likes the idea that he can push these guys. And to me, this is an indication that he likes this team too.
I want to ask you about the running back situation for a moment because we talked about that off the top. I think it's a fascinating group because I think they're really interesting personalities. Nate Frazier is one of our favorite. Obviously, the Georgia running game took a big step forward last year as they seek to be more explosive, need to take another step forward this year. And it's one of those things where bringing back a guy like Nate in particular was a really big deal for Georgia. And it's also a situation where if you look at the landscape in the SEC, guys like Kewan Lacey, Ole Miss, Ahmad Hardy, Missouri, there are running backs right now getting more attention than Frazier is. I believe Nate's decision to come back to Georgia is a very big deal, but it's also a chance for him to, I think, rewrite his own story and maybe recast him in terms of where he's ranked among SEC running backs and have a chance to ascend towards the top of that right now because as Georgia seeks more, to use Kirby's word, elite play from its running backs, fair to point out that, they're probably not still ranked among the best returners in the SEC. That's more of a Lacey, Hardy, Smothers thing. There are backs this offseason who are going to get more attention than Nate Frazier is going to, and I'm sure Nate loves the chance to let the nation know exactly how good he thinks he can be.
Yeah, throw Jaden Ball in there, Florida too.
Yeah.
Talk about guys that, and I was at the baseball game yesterday talking to some people, and listen, I think Nate Frazier, I think he's fine. I don't think he's DeAndre Swift. I don't think he's Nick Chubb. I don't think he's Sony Michel. I don't think he's Todd Gurley. But I was bemoaning the fact that, there was a time when Georgia had, one of the top 2 or 3 backs in the nation seemingly every year, the RBU days. And I don't know from one year to the next. I do think Georgia's got a very good offensive line. I know they're very committed to the run. I know Nate's got every opportunity. From what I've heard, he's had a tremendous offseason. He was at a booster function lately, talking to some of the guys, and I know he's gone through some personal losses in his life. I mean, this is going to be a very motivated player. This is a guy that everybody is going to root for. I'll be interested also. I mean, I think we saw, sparks and flares from him as a freshman. I thought last year he carried the load. I thought he did a great job. There's a part of me that thinks if he doesn't get injured and he's inside the 10, I believe he finds his way in the end zone. I do think he's very good. I really hope that he can take the next. I'm like you. I hope that Nate can take that next step to elite, to the kind of guy you look at and say, boy, that guy's gonna be starting for somebody's fantasy football team. We know he's put the work in. We know he has a good attitude. We know he's all in. And so, this is part of what we love about college sports is watching these guys grow before our eyes and get better. We've seen it happen with other Bulldogs that have improved. I think about Ladd McConkey and how he got better and better and better. And, I'm really excited and hopeful that Nate can take that step and step into that RBU ring. And he's going to be a guy that we can talk about like we do so many others. I mean, I guess we'll throw James Cook in there too when we think about his big plays in the championship games and Zamir White, Bullen, and Kenny McIntosh. And now it's Nate's time to try to help Dogs get that ring.
Yeah, let me say one more thing about Nate Frazier, which is that, so you say, well, okay, it may not be a Sony Michel, may not be a DeAndre Swift, but it's important to note that his freshman season, going back now 2 years, statistically almost identical to DeAndre Swift's, almost identical to Sony Michel's, and we're 6 years removed from Swift's last year. George, that's a decent span of time. And statistically, really no one has come close to Swift-like numbers since DeAndre left. Georgia shares a lot more carries among running backs. That's part of the reason why. Last year, Nate just finished an eyelash short of a 1,000-yard season. So I think part of the reason why Georgia fans have justified optimism in Frazier, other running backs too, potentially, but specifically Frazier, is in a 6-year span of games since, the guys like Michel and Swift left this program, no one statistically has come close to doing what Nate Frazier has done. So there is some track record to suggest, hey, maybe even more of a, Chubb's a little bit of a different animal to me. But a Swift Michel type season, I mean, I would say the statistical track record through 2 years makes that seem totally possible. Now, whether it happens, we'll find out. But the track record through 2 years suggests it's certainly possible.
Well, we hope so, because the schedule this year is going to be tough. You're playing 9 SEC games. And also,
Good point.
You also think about how Kirby manages these backs. I remember Kenny McIntosh's year where at the beginning of the year, and I believe it was 2022, he was not getting a ton of carries. Well, there was a reason for that. I think Kirby knew it was going to be a 15-game season. So part of this is just how Kirby manages the back. So I do understand that you can't be giving backs 20 and 25 touches the first half of the season and expect them to be there for the stretch run. So part of this is just roster management. They got that running back transfer from Kentucky. From what I'm hearing, he's looking really good too, Brandon. I heard he ripped off a 78-year run the other day, and Kirby spoke about him at the press conference yesterday. So there is depth there. There is going to be more of a rotation, to your point. I guess when I think of Swift and maybe a little bit of the fanboy in me coming out, some of the cuts and the dynamics and just the pure spectacle of what they did. Maybe at the end of the day, you're making a good point. Hey, Nate Frazier's putting up the numbers, maybe in not quite as sensational or acrobatic fashion, but every back to his own. And Nate does have a flair. He does have a burst. He's shown good vision. He has gotten better. Maybe we'll see more of those kind of highlight runs again. You think about DeAndre Swift, and there's just something about not just the name, but the highlights that Swift made. Maybe it has a little bit to do with the flair. But to your point, I think the offensive line is going to be good. I know Kirby's committed to the run, and Nate Frazier's the man right now. They're going to put the ball in his hands. And everything I've heard, this kid has had an unbelievable offseason. His attitude is plugged in. And who knows, he may be holding a trophy. And if he is, that'll certainly, put him in that circle of greatness that we've become accustomed to at Georgia at the running back position.
Mike, good stuff. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Dr. Pepper here today. Look forward to reading plenty from you at DawgNation.com and talking to you back here again very soon as well. Hope you and your family have a happy Easter as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, one of the things I do pay attention to are statistical track records. What seems possible based on previous comps. And Frazier is close to a Swift, Michelle comp. He's close to that. As I said, I kind of put Nick Chubb into a different category. I believe that Nick Chubb's the second best running back in Georgia program history, behind only Herschel Walker. But in the category of a Michelle and a Swift, no small thing, I think that Nate Frazier still has a chance to be that. Understanding full well, as Mike pointed out, it's a tougher game-to-game schedule probably now. Georgia throws the ball now a lot more than it used to. Georgia shares carries among running backs a lot more than it used to. There is a certain aspect of Georgia's reduced running back stats that trace back to coaching decisions in some respects, and maybe good decisions, probably are good decisions. But when you look at what Nate could be, who you compare him to in recent Georgia history is an example of that. That's part of, I think, the really interesting discussion right there. By the way, we've got Davin Bellamy coming up in just a moment. We'll talk to Davin about this and a whole lot more. Prior to that, let's get ready to do an SEC through just for a moment. Saw an interesting quote from Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss. Chambliss was talking about his brand new Ole Miss coaching staff, Pete Golding. Had some very complimentary things to say about Golding that a lot of folks are going to take as a comparison to the previous staff in Lane Kiffin, which is interesting. Chambliss is a fascinating figure because, it was that staff led by Lane Kiffin. I'm sure there are individual guys on the staff that get some of the specific credit for this, but the staff led by Lane Kiffin that identified Chambliss out of nowhere, made him into a national name, and it was in the offense that that Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. were running that allowed Chambliss to have great success. And now that group is at LSU. They're going to be working with Sam Levitt. And now Chambliss, who really became a nationally known quarterback last year, big topic this offseason, now he is the guy at Ole Miss fighting through court to get that extra year of eligibility. Now he has it. What will he now be without this LSU coaching staff? This is going to be a really fun one. Ole Miss LSU, this is the Magnolia Bowl rivalry. They played really early this season. And I would say there's a little bit of pressure on both sides here. There is pressure on Lane Kiffin to demonstrate that he can do with a Sam Levitt, assuming he's healthy, what he did with a Chambliss a year ago, and that offensive system can hit the ground running at LSU and have great success. And for someone like Chambliss who says, I'm actually happy with the coaching staff now, their commitment to me, their commitment to this program, I'm actually happier with that than I was, with the Kiffin situation. I mean, if you're Ole Miss, you need that to be true too, that upon losing Lane Kiffin, you chose to elevate Pete Golding. You chose to say, we've got the right guy on campus right now. Was that a decision born out of convenience because what else are you going to do? Or was this a decision born out of conviction that we really do believe that Golding is the right guy? It's a big step forward for Ole Miss a year ago. They don't want to take a step back, but given the transition, going to be really, really challenging and a fascinating rivalry matchup when those two teams meet relatively early in this season. Speaking of rivalries, there was a thing that got some attention yesterday from Auburn spring practice where I guess they had a quote-unquote Iron Bowl period during practice, and over the loudspeakers they were blaring the anthem that Alabama fans like to sing along to profanely. Near the end of the game, the Dixieland Delight from the country music supergroup Alabama, which actually is a song about Tennessee, but we'll let them fight that out between themselves. Either way, it's a famous song connected to Alabama football. Auburn was playing it during practice yesterday, and in the Yellowhammer State, this got a good bit of attention. I think stuff like this is just really fun. For all the things that Auburn hasn't done, weirdly over the course of the last decade plus, they've actually beaten Alabama more than their fair share, probably. Something that Gus Malzahn did on the semi-regular. Brian Harsin at least kept some of the games close. That Auburn has not embarrassed itself against Alabama as much as it has against some of the other teams that it's played. And if you're Alex Golesh, who I think is a little bit of an unknown to most SEC fans, and probably not a guy that even Auburn fans feel like they knew all that much about. If you want to make a name for yourself, if you want to create some brand cachet for yourself as the Auburn coach, embracing the Iron Bowl, I don't think it's a bad thing to do, especially at a time in which, honestly, beating Alabama doesn't quite feel like the moonshot that it once did. Now, we'll see what Alabama does to respond to some of the doubters here this season, but for now, it's not a pipe dream to say, hey, in year one, we're going to take down big bad Alabama. Maybe you should take them down based on how Alabama played in its final two games of 2025. But either way, fun to see brand new Auburn coach as a way of introducing himself to his fans saying, we're going to embrace the Iron Bowl. We're going to work for it. We'll play Dixieland Delight in practice. I don't know if that necessarily means much to the players, but symbolically maybe some value there. I don't hate it. Let me give you one more story quickly. So where Texas A&M got a huge recruiting win. Zyron Forstall, top 10 level defensive end, 5-star type guy, presumably a very expensive recruit. Aggies step up and win this big recruiting battle. And to me, stuff like this is just a small reminder that A&M still has the financial wherewithal to play at a very high level. It just seems really weird, doesn't it, that we give so much attention to Texas as opposed to Texas A&M, and the expansion of the SEC seems to have worked against A&M. They had, talk about brand recognition, they had the brand in the West of the SEC team representing Texas. Now that's not something they have with themselves anymore. There's big spenders all around them. LSU's a big rival of theirs, at least a relatively new makeshift rival. They're spending a ton of money, but A&M is still a pretty well-resourced program. You don't see anything other than the really aggressive spenders winning for these 5-star defensive end types right now. A&M did that this week. Seems like we don't quite know where to put them in the pecking order of the SEC, but still doing enough to at least stay within shouting distance of the top tier of this league. A recruiting win like this is a reminder of that, and we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, we always love it. Get a chance to talk to our guy, Davin Bellamy. That's always a lot of fun. And Davin, we have you on the show. One of the things we love doing is getting a chance to talk about, some of your moments at Georgia practice, what it feels like to be on the other side of some of the stuff that the fans get a chance to hear about, sometimes see themselves or hear whispers about. There was a viral video this week where, Kirby Smart on the microphone, he's shouting. And I guess in this particular moment, Elyiss Williams wins the practice rep against Amaris Williams. Kirby says yesterday, listen, not what you think it is. Most Georgia fans, I think, do understand that. There's a million practice reps. Nobody wins every practice rep. But there's also this element of a clip like this feels like the perfect embodiment of that welcome to Georgia moment where a guy like Amaris, who you've talked about, you think he has a chance to be a really good player, but at UGA, you still got to shed blocks. You still got to get to the ball carrier. You still got to be stout in that aspect of line of scrimmage play. It feels perfect in terms of the storyline, even if it's imperfect in terms of what might have actually happened at Georgia practice that day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. And this is just, Coach Smart being him, right? This guy was brought here to get the quarterback on the ground. We were 106 in sacks, last year. But the key thing at Georgia is you have to stop the run in order to rush the passer. Take care of first and second down. And the first thing that came to me was this guy, he's came from Auburn. And this is Coach Smart's first time being able to press his buttons a little bit. Let's see how this guy is, when I curse him out. Let's see how this guy is, when I put him on the spot. So it's two tails to that viral clip. The first tale is, I definitely agree. You have to be able to stop the run to rush the passer. And with a transfer guy, Amaris Williams that's coming in, he's brought in to get the quarterback on the ground. Let's not forget that, because stopping the run was not, our problem last year. It was getting the quarterback on the ground. But to another thing, we have to test this guy to see if he's Georgia made. When you're at Auburn, they're probably not as a big speakerphone yelling out, everything you did wrong. So how do you react, to that? So that's part of that. But that's his welcome to Georgia moment. That's Coach Smart trying to see, let's see how this guy bounce back from this. Does he take it as a challenge, right? Or does he, shut down because I called him out? Because Coach Smart has a very strategic way, of coaching. He was, especially with me, he knew that I'm not sensitive.
Right.
I don't wear my, emotions on my sleeve. You can be as hard on me as you possibly can, and it's going to roll off, and we're going to get to the next play. Those are the type players that he likes to coach, because he likes to make, practice more chaotic than the games. Now, the only thing that I don't like, there's a number one rule when it comes to playing defensive end.
Okay.
And like you said, we all lose reps. But the number one rule is a tight end should never block a defensive end.
Okay.
So if my coach is yelling on the speaker about how this tight end is just, running over my DN, that is a problem. Because the number one rule is defense end does not get blocked by your tight end. But look, the guys that we have, playing tight end, they're freaks. They're 6'7", 6'8", so it's a little different.
And sometimes, and I'm going to talk over my skis for a second, sometimes it's also like the crackdown thing too, right, where you may be getting a little bit, I don't want to say blindside, but, you're also getting a chance to maybe come at him towards his ear hole a little bit too, right?
Yeah, but by this time, this guy's this is second year in college football. He's a high star guy. When you're in certain type of, positions, your ears, like a dog, they're supposed to pop up.
Okay.
So you being blindsided by a downside block, those aren't the conversations that I want to be having with a guy who was, supposed to be a top defensive end.
Understand.
That's coming out of the portal. By the time you get to me, and I done paid you all this money to get here, I shouldn't be teaching you week one, freshman year stuff of here's the tight end, to your right side, and he could be blocking down to you. By this time of your career, I need you to have some type of cat-like, ability feel to understand that this guy may be blocking down. I got to play back, into this block. But that's just the point of emphasis that Coach Smart is trying, to put on this young guy. We brought you here to rush the passer. But in order to get the third down, it got to be third and long. And if we cannot stop the run on first and second down, you will never get in the game to rush the passer. So I do like what Coach Smart is doing, and me being, a part of his, program for so long, I definitely understand what that was for.
I think that's a really great football explanation. The other thing that I think is funny for fans, and we see this kind of thing come up from time to time, where Kirby uses a moment at practice to yell at the coaches. Like if you listen to the clip, he's yelling at whatever defensive coach about, please don't put him in against the run. Like, he uses a player moment to now rib the coaches, which only gets them more fired up now too. I think stuff like that is really, really funny when a player, having an issue at practice, brief moment, whatever else, becomes a thing for Kirby to also yell at the coaches about, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, man, that's kind of what he does, man. So when I first heard the clip, it reminded me of the week we was about to play Notre Dame, and we're going over the scouting report, and Coach Smart is, he's on the whiteboard, and he's like, we got this guy, Mike McGlinchey. He's a number 9, overall pick. Is where they got him going. He's top 10. Zoe and Davin, you guys played good last week, but let's see what you guys do this week. You think you're all that, so let's just see what you do against this top 10 pick. Let's just see that. And he kind of says it as like he's challenging you, but he's trying to do it in a very sarcastic way. So it was like, yeah, if you think you're good, let's see you go this week. So when I heard the clip, of him going, talking to Williams, I was like, that's him. Don't put him in against the run, coach. He can't play the run. Even though he's talking to the coach, he knows that the player can definitely hear that. So he's trying to see, how is this player's brain? I know he hears me. Is he going to say, you know what, the very next play, I'm going to show you why you don't need to take me out, versus the run? Or do I just say, you know what, Coach Smart is right. I can't play the run. I'm here to rush the passer. So just knowing him, that's how he tests his players.
When you hear a guy like Nate Frazier talk, and we played some of these clips a little earlier, and listen, I think Chauncey Bowens is great at this kind of thing too, but Frazier's a guy that has really made an impression on me the last couple of years. Thoughtful, respect for history, committed to his craft, owns some mistakes, works to get better. When a guy just steps to a podium, is just honest like that, honest about, here's what I think I need to do to be better, here's what I think I've done in the past, he seems to be just kind of an open book, just more than happy just to, not in a dramatic way, just a matter-of-fact way, this is what I think my role in football is supposed to be. What does it do for you as a teammate when a guy like that just seems to approach his game in just a really real way? And what does that mean, I guess, for the Georgia running backs overall this year? You know what, man?
I love Mike, but Mike, he is cut from that cloth. He is cut from that. I'm not going to go to TG. I'm going to DeAndre Swift, Sony. Chubb is kind of, a different back. But I think the difference is back when I was playing, the running back was getting in between 15 to 20 carries a game.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in from 2014 to 2017. Now, with more data, I don't want my top back getting 20 carries a game.
Yeah.
So what you're starting to see now is a more running back by committee. So if he was getting the 20 to 25, carries a game, you would see more of 17 carries, 150 yards. But that does not take away from his talent, that the game has shifted to where you don't need one running back getting 25, targets. You need 3, getting about 7 to 10 apiece. So that's the first thing. He is, in my opinion, cut from that cloth. And I seen one, he did an interview and he said when he experienced freshman year success, he let it get to his head. For a player to look in the mirror at such a young age and acknowledge that shows me that he wants to be great. And he fixed his fumbling problem simply off of Nate Frazier saying he fixed the little things that he was doing. So that tells me right now that this guy knows that he is, cut from that cloth. But fumbling the ball is not what great running backs do. So for him to be able to check himself, what a lot of people can't do in sports and even, outside of sports, shows me the type of maturity that this young man has. The things, that I like about him is it's very rare that you can find a back that's very physical, and when he gets into the open space, he's taking it for 6. That's what Nick Chubb had. That's what TG had. Sony, I love you madly, but Sony used to get, hawked down a lot. And I love Sony madly, he used to get hawked down a lot. It was two people that I saw that was like 6'1", 220, that could, when they got past the linebackers, the safeties had no chance. That's how I judge how great, a running back can be. And he's cut from that cloth where he can run between the tackles. And once he breaks the tackles, of the linebackers, he's outrunning the safeties. And to see a guy that can run that physical, now he's fixed his fumbling problem and he's a home run hitter. That's why I say he's in the same, party as those guys that I played with. He's a great football player and he's going to be very, important to Georgia's success this year.
No, I think that's really well said. I got to ask you one thing before I let you go. And the honest truth is, every now and then I just forget to do something. I was going to do this last week because I thought it was hilarious. I just forgot to bring it up. So let me do this before I let you go. So a couple of weeks ago, there was this weird thing on the internet where former LSU defensive lineman Braden Fehoko, I guess trying to be a social media presence, we're all trying to get attention. I guess he's no different. Goes after C.J. Allen and like the Georgia defense. And let me tell you something. I thought it was hilarious. A lot of Georgia fans, listeners to this show have enjoyed this too. It's like you and Eric Stokes and all these former Georgia players just came out of the woodworks and just, in defense of CJ, in defense of the Georgia defense, going against the LSU, in this case, Fehoko and his NFL draft opinions. It's just, for a couple of days, this was just sort of a fun way to pass the time, watching all y'all come to CJ Allen's defense, who, by the way, doesn't need defending. His game speaks for itself. But It's still fun to see, once a dog, always a dog type thing, because you and Stokes, the first one I saw, and then you jumped in pretty big too. I just loved all of that. You guys stick together, don't you?
Yeah, man. You know what? Stokes is a part of that class where, it was my junior year and he was a freshman. And during, practice, and the games where they knew that, I wanted Georgia to be nasty and we stood up for each other. If you attack one, you attack us all. And Stokes was a freshman, Malik Herring, Monty Rice, DeAndre Baker, So what I'm seeing now, 7 years later, I love it because that message still, carries on the football field. And even if we out, going to get lunch, if you're on this team and you talk about my guy, then we're all coming. If you fight one, we fight all. And that was me being the leader. I wanted to impose that message on all the guys that was on that team because one, on the field, that's demoralizing. When the offense is on the sideline and they see a defense that's talking trash, having fun, dancing, making tackles, even though Coach Smart, his first year, hated all that because at Bama, they did it the traditional way. You make the play, you button your chin strap up, and you play the next one. Well, I always, thought about the mental warfare. How does it look from the sideline when you see 11 people running to the ball, and when they make that crazy tackle and that big hit, they're all celebrating? To the sideline of the other team, it looks like, man, they having so much fun out there. I don't know what we're going to do with them. But also that carries off, off the field. That creates a brother-like relationship where even 7 years down the line, Stokes know from playing with Davin, and Davin was our leader. You don't say nothing to our players. You stay on your sideline. You don't cross our 50. So just to see all our Georgia guys come to defense, of C.J. Allen. When one, this is a guy who the defensive coordinator said that during crucial games, the majority of the time, this guy calls the defense. He's either 19 or 20 years old. To be able to call a defense, to understand the down of distance, the percentages of the formation that team is in, and Coach Glenn Schumann says, C.J. Allen, you can call the defense. There's not one drill at the pro day or the combine that can get inside his brain and show you, how much he knows. And then you got a guy that's trying to get famous off of clickbait, knowing that this guy, I don't want to say his name, but the guy that came, from LSU, knowing that being a professional, football player, knowing that pro day and combine is just not football. And like I said before, you're judging this guy off of he flipped his hip 5 times and had to run and guard a post route during the drill 40 yards down the field. Well, if I'm drafting CJ Allen to do that, then the GM should be fired. See, CJ Allen is going to be drafted to bring my program closer together, bring a winning DNA, and be the quarterback, of my defense. And I always say this, man. If you're trying to draft a guy off shorts and girdles and see how fast he can run and how far he can jump with no skill, then we should all just be drafting deers. But if you want to draft a guy with some ball skills and some football knowledge, then we all know that guys coming from Georgia are the best way to go. I don't care what you say about, CJ Allen. The proof is in the pudding. You draft a Georgia guy, they're going to come and change your locker room, change your culture, teach you how to work, and teach you how to win. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be running for the postseason or deep in the playoffs. So that's why all our guys, came to defense. We know how hard we work. We know we run an NFL-style defense, right? So just to say that Georgia players don't translate, to the NFL makes no sense. Georgia runs an NFL multiple style defense. Well, on third down, I need a linebacker where I know I can play 3-4 on first down, and he can play the box. And then on third down, I may mug him up, in the A gap and rush him to go get the quarterback. That is essentially what Georgia does. It teaches you to play multiple, positions. So one, we all stood up for each other knowing that's just how we're made, especially the guys that were raised up under me. And then two, it's just a complete lie for clicks. Georgia defensive players are meant for the NFL.
No, I think it's well said, Davin. Always great stuff. Listen, appreciate your time. Hope you are getting ready for a great happy Easter, enjoying the springtime of year. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, poured by Dr. Pepper today, and we'll look forward to our chance to talk to you very soon.
And happy Easter, everyone, and go Dogs. You already know it.
Go Dogs indeed, Davin. Great stuff. All right, fun with Davin Bellamy there. You always love that. And speaking of fun on the way out the door here, let's also give you a golden shoe today. We don't do a ton of this kind of rival jabbing, but since our guy George on tap, we like him a lot. He pointing out, I'm not really sure what the context is, but obviously the trouble that the Florida Gators and their 2008 national champion, they've had some issues off the field. Real George on tap says, hey, the next time the Gators talk stuff, just remind them of this, and you no doubt can do that. But I'll tell you this, George on tap, there may be nothing better to remind them of than the fact that 2008 is a long time ago. Because there's nobody who loved making fun of Georgia's title drought when it existed, more so than Florida did, lousy, stinking Gators that they are. Well, guess what? Pretty soon, the Florida national championship drought going to be old enough to vote. I mean, or maybe I guess it's about that old now. I mean, boy, it's been a while for these lousy, stinking Gators. Georgia on tap helps us remember that. And speaking of them, it's also been a very long time since they've beaten Georgia on the football field, too. About 1,971 days. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, poured by Dr. Pepper. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. So whatever's on your mind, we'll bounce through a few comments here and then get ready to bounce on into a fun day. Marshall Fleming says, Davin's always one of my favorite guys to listen to. Yeah, Davin brings a lot of passion for football, and I really like that. And it's just interesting. And to me, it's interesting to hear anybody talk about a subject they have a lot of experience with, a lot of passion about. And obviously, when it's football, that's especially true. And in Davin's case, you really got a lot of that. And I think it makes for a good combination for sure. His passion, his knowledge, his experience, all coming out in a really compelling way. Let us see what else. Yeah, so a lot going over in the Facebook comment section. I think they're over here on the YouTube page also talking about some of the long-standing records. That's always a fun thing to consider. And by the way, John Hendricks also points out on a day in which there was a lot of Georgia running back talk, hopefully our guy Frankie Patterson got a chance to consume some of that because normally pretty active in the chat, a very, very big fan anytime Georgia running back discussion comes up. Right, he also says, what was the best trick played on me on April Fools? I don't know that there ever has – boy, I don't know. That's a good question. I did say, Randy, before the show began today, or right as the show was beginning, that one of these days I'd love to do a good April Fool's joke, like a good – like execute it well, have it work out. I saw Georgia Tech did some dumb thing with its official academic account. Better than that nonsense. You know how, like, Pardon the Interruption does this every year. I believe they've always done this. Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon, they'll come on the show. They'll do a topic off the top that's they did this for a long time. I'm assuming they still do it. Show's still on the air, where it's a crazy made-up topic, and at the end of when the bell rings, the debate time is over, they say, you want to tell them happy, April Fools, whatever it is they say. I think there's a way to do it well and have it come off. But if you got to do it, you got to do it really well. Now, the problem with April Fools related to content these days is there's so much crazy stuff happening in sports and in life that distinguishing the, oh my gosh, this is so crazy, it's an April Fool's joke, from this just happens to be a random thing happening on a basic Wednesday, get a little harder to separate those two things these days, it seems like, unfortunately.
We have this that came in from Utah State for their April Fools.
Okay, see, yeah, I mean, so is it the fact, so they're the Aggies, so those are cow spots, is that what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't hate that if that was a real thing, but that's not bad. I could see a team doing that too, actually doing the cow spots. But that's pretty funny. Good job by Utah State. What Georgia Tech did was, their fight song says, hell of an engineer, hell with George or whatever else. And so they put it out on their academic account. We're not going to say that in our fight song anymore, which, is dumb. But what do you expect? Let's see what else. Across all platforms here. So according to Bill Sanders, it's been 6,292 days since the Lizards won a national championship. And y'all, like that's that's a big deal for Florida. Big deal for Florida because this was the thing they used against Georgia. And now, 2008 is a while ago. In 2008, I was several years ahead of being a dad. Listen, I was a very different guy in 2008. The world's a different place in 2008. It's pre-social media for the most part, right? Maybe a little bit of Facebook, but pre-social media for the most part. That's the last championship for Florida. The world looked different. Everything was totally different. DT talking about playing April Fool's Day jokes at work. So I'm a little bit of a Grinch about stuff like that because I would like to do something well on the air, but I'm kind of a Grinch about I don't wear green on St. Patrick's Day. I don't want to be pinched. I don't want this is going to come across the wrong way. I'm not that into workplace humor. I'm not that into team building and, hey, we're all going to have these fun little things that we're doing. That makes me sound terrible, and I'm sorry to be that way. I'm just not that into workplace humor. So I would like to do a April Fool's joke on the air, but I don't want to have to play along with like an April Fool's joke like in the building, if that makes sense, which is probably not a great attitude, but I am as God made me. All
right, we got the tech stuff.
All right, let's see the tech thing. Yeah, do we have it?
Yeah, so this is the first part of it.
This is so dumb. They're like, Georgia Tech officially bans hell and helluva from fight song traditions. They write, effective immediately, all references to the words hell and helluva will be removed from official Georgia Tech usages, including the fight song, the flags, ramblin' around, it says Doozy's going to replace helluva and Tarnation will replace hell. Honestly, just not funny. Not funny.
All right, we got how they were going to reference Georgia now. Utah Nation with Georgia.
Yeah, not funny. Not funny. And now you've got AI to help you. I mean, if you've got AI to help you and that's the best you can do, first of all, it's obviously not a real flag. Just not funny. Not funny.
Very on brand, though.
Yeah. Add this to the L's that Tech has taken. They can't even win on April Fool's Day. Bill Sanders says, do you know the reason April 1st is called April Fool's Day? I do not. I don't even think I come close to knowing. It's also interesting that in my lifetime, this movie's now really old, is that in my lifetime, April Fool's Day has taken on a completely different meaning. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I was a child, April Fool's Day meant the thing we're talking about now. People playing jokes and making, basically making up stories and trying to trick people into believing something that wasn't true. And there's still a lot of that in sports, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of that in sports. Most of it's not any funnier than what Georgia Tech attempted. But there is also cultural cachet around the idea that April Fool's Day being the day that repeats itself over and over again, dating back to the Bill Murphy. That's Groundhog's Day. Never mind. What am I talking about? I'm going to pretend that was an April Fool's joke. It's been a long run. What in the world am I even talking about? Anyway, let me try to see if I can get the train back on the tracks. Let us see what else. Jack Fullerton says it's going to be flag football next year. You could do a joke around that. UJ Marine says BA's not into workplace humor or team building. Good thing you didn't join the military. Is there a lot of that in the military? Of course, it's much more important to have camaraderie there because you are fighting for each other's lives as opposed to the typical workplace where you're just sort of fighting to get the TPS reports out on time. A very, very different need for union and camaraderie overall. All right, so Bill Sanders says, for those who don't know, the entire reason April 1st is called April Fool's Day is under the old Roman calendar. The year began in the spring on April 1st when the decision was made to change to the Gregorian calendar we now use, which had the new year beginning in January instead of April. There were groups of people who insisted on continuing to celebrate the new year in April as they always had, and those people were called April Fools. Thus, April 1st became April Fool's Day. That's really interesting. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. That fight over like the proper calendar, which I only know a little bit about, but I do know something about, reminds me of the fight now over daylight savings time. And this is one of those things where everybody thinks they agree on this, but if you go one level deeper, you find out that they actually don't. In other words, if you put out the poll of, should we keep doing time change every year? I bet you'd get 90 to 95% of the people at least say, yeah, we got to stop doing this. No more time changes. It seems like at first blush, everybody agrees with this. There should be no time change. But let me tell you what you find out. And I have paid attention to this. Try to anyway, as just a citizen on Earth. When you go like one level deeper of, we all agree no more time change. That seems to be a thing that people agree on. But what you find out is among the people that say no more time change, people are about equally split about which time they want to keep, whether they want to keep daylight savings time or they want to keep standard time. People are pretty split on that. And a lot of this comes down to how much tolerance you have for darkness in the morning because, there's only so much daylight. It's either going to be daylight in the end of the day, daylight at the beginning of the day. But when you're playing around with this, at one half of the year or the other, you're going to have a good bit of darkness during the morning. So I think that's wild. And we obviously don't talk about the Georgia General Assembly on this show very much. But I did see where, but I don't really know where all this stands, but I guess the state Senate, the other day passed a bill about going to Atlantic time. Now, if you don't know, Atlantic time is the time zone to our east. We have Eastern time zone. One time zone over is called Atlantic time zone. So basically shifting to Atlantic time zone and just keeping that all the time, which means we'd be a different time than our border states. We're already a different time than Alabama, but that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And I don't really care, but it doesn't seem like a great idea. So what point is what Bill is describing about the old fight over the Gregorian and the Roman calendar feels like the fight we're having now over daylight savings time. Kenneth Holt says a good April Fool's joke would be Bama publishing its rushing yard total from the SEC championship. That's exactly right, Kenneth. I like that. Good memory to a fun time. Kenneth Holt also says that Texas could put Texas's back up as a Texas is back as a April Fool's joke. I like that too. That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Let us see what else. Matt Brookovina says, don't forget, Tennessee would be hearkening back to the glory days of the 1960s if it wasn't for Florida State having to start a third-string quarterback in 1998. That's right. What, Marcus Outson starts the national championship game. Tennessee wins first BCS. And, boy, it hadn't even been anything like that ever since then. And that, as you say, was a little bit of a precarious spot. Foster Moss says today would be the worst day for something serious to happen. Yeah, it probably would. Probably would. Let us see what else. A couple more, then we're going to go. UJ Marine pointing out this is an interesting thing. He says, if you're Texas, should you really be serving beef at your tailgate? A lot of brisket, things like that. If your mascot is a cow. I think it's a fair question. I think that is a fair question. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that around here. But I think that's a fair question. I think I'm actually okay with it. I think the big longhorn steer is a celebration of beef, which I'm probably okay with that. But I think it's a very fair question. And see, even in the chat right now, there's disagreement about which time preference people have, standard or daylight. Now, I'll also tell you this, and this is not going to be a huge surprise because I just got April Fool's and Groundhog Day confused just out of just sheer stupidity. But the space-time continuum of what time it'd be daylight and dark if we didn't change the time, I have to admit something. I'm completely flummoxed by all of that. I really don't understand. And yeah, I'm not proud of that necessarily, but the whole thought of, well, if we didn't change the time, what would it be? And it's just one of those things that has just always been, for the most part, over my head, among many things probably. Stick D says, where do you think the first Dawg Nation invasion is going to occur in 2026? That's a really good question. It's a really good question. I have heard some chatter about some things. Don't exactly know yet, but some of these conversations are taking place. Hope to be able to tell you more about that here very soon. Alan Hampton talking about a very different kind of April Fool's joke in here. Always interesting stuff. All right, anything else before we go? Lance D says, I always hated being stuck in Atlanta traffic at 5:30 and it was dark. Yeah, I'll tell you my example of that too is, so when you watch these NFL games, sometimes it's like the Patriots playing a home game and at 4:30 in the afternoon, it's pitch black dark. Oh my gosh, that's really rough. And I guess Central Time Zone has this too, right? Like you can be in Alabama in the dead of winter and it gets dark really early there too, right? At least certain parts of Alabama, I think. Like I said before, I don't fully understand all of this. But that would just be very hard for me. I mean, a lot of this stuff I think is made up, but I do have some aspect of what you think of as like, is it seasonal affect disorder? Is that what that's called? Like I hate the winter. I hate early dark. I hate cold. I don't like to use a word like depressing because that's such a loaded word, but I don't feel as good. I just don't. It's not a fun experience. I don't believe I could live at a place where that was such an intense thing. That would be very hard for me. Henry Dion also brings up a good point. We're talking about, we'll finish with this. Talking about, hey, defensive ends can't get blocked by tight ends, which I think is a very defensive end thing to hear Davin Bellamy say, and really interesting. As Henry points out, now listen, Elyiss is also 6'7", blocks at the sun, a little bit different than a normal tight end. I think Henry brings up a really good point on that. So Kenneth Holt is pro standard anti-daylight savings. Yeah, there you go. Matt says when he lived in D.C., it got dark at 4:30 during the winter. My theory about Washington, and this is not politics, my theory about Washington is I think that Washington may be secretly America's worst weather city. I feel like, because having been there a few times, the heat of the summer is as hot as anything you'll feel anywhere. It's essentially on a swamp, as hot as you'll feel anywhere. Wintertime, as cold as you can feel anywhere. I don't know that any city has the greater extremes of really hot summers, really cold winters. I think that low-key it may be the worst weather city. That's my theory anyway. Brian Whitaker says it can get dark at 5 in Alabama sometimes. Boy, that's rough. That's rough. Philip Jordan Wells says higher elevations have faster nighttime. Is that true? I'm telling you, like, there are some things I don't know the first thing about, and that would be an example of that. All right, we're going to go. Good stuff, everybody. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric, including getting your air conditioning unit and all this springtime weather. Listen, what time it gets daylight, what time it turns dark, well, I don't know. But when weather's warm, you want your AC working, and RS Andrews can make sure that remains true. So find them online at rsandrews.com. That is rsandrews.com. Hope you all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, poured by Dr. Pepper. We'll look forward to talking to you then.